My Best Friends Live in the Woods. The Adventures of Albert by Anne Michelle Mracek. Chapter 41. Fiddle, Fern, Fritters, and Fossils. Sometime during the night the rain stopped, and by morning the sun rose on a soggy forest. Benjamin's parents, Clara and her parents, Jimmy Squirrel, his mother and sisters, and Misty and her parents had all knocked on the front door at some point during the night. Mother Skunk woke in her chair to see every inch of floor space covered with a sleeping guest. Every towel and blanket she owned was in use, even the dish towels, to cover and comfort the soaked as they stumbled in from the storm. Albert had given his place on the great moss bed to Clara's mother. He was sleeping sitting up on the hearth-room floor, his back propped against the cave wall. Clara was using his lap as her pillow and was still sound asleep when he opened his eyes. He smiled down at her, stroking her head as she slept. He glanced up to see Mother Skunk smiling at him. He blew her a kiss, then leaned his head back again, closed his eyes, and drifted back to sleep. Everyone was exhausted. Yesterday had been a long, hard day. As each refugee had arrived, they needed to talk and retell their escape from the flood. Stress and emotions were high. When at last everyone began to stir, Marigold started the teapot. "I would sure like one of those strawberry muffins about now," Clarissa was saying to Mother Skunk. "They were amazing," she agreed. "I wonder how the mice managed last night," Mother Skunk said. Matthew joined the conversation. "I think I need to take a team and walk the forest to survey the damages." Mr. Beaver chimed in. "It'll take another day or two for the river to go back in its banks. No point in starting to rebuild till then." Mr. and Mrs. Badger were sipping tea and listening. "Then you will just have to come and stay with us for a while," Mr. Badger offered the beavers. "Assuming we still have a house," he added. "Oh, I couldn't impose," Mrs. Beaver said most sincerely. "What? I couldn't sleep at night thinking of Auntie Bee's little ones homeless. Not another word. You are staying in our new addition. After all, Mr. Beaver built it," Mrs. Badger said and patted Tulip and Junior on the head. "Again, assuming we have a home left," Mr. Badger said, exchanging worried looks with Mr. Beaver. "Well, no point in standing around worrying about it. Let's head out and see what's left," Matthew said, standing and heading toward the door. "I'm coming," Mr. Beaver said. "Me too," Mr. Badger joined in. Then another knock was heard on the front door. "Now who could that be?" Nicholas said as he moved to open it. "Is everyone okay?" they heard a voice calling in. "That sounds like Tommy Red Fox," Albert said. And sure enough, Nicholas opened the door to see Tommy standing with a huge bucket full of Fiddle Fern greens. "Anyone hungry?" He grinned and held up the bucket. "These got uprooted in the flood. No point in letting them go to waste," he said as he handed Nicholas the bucket of tasty treats. "Oh, heavens! Such a welcome relief," Mother Skunk said as she put her arm around Tommy's shoulder and let him in. "We are packed wall to wall, but we can squeeze you in," she laughed. "Bluebell, let's make a nice pancake batter to fry these up." Mother Skunk was truly thankful. She had been fretting all morning how to feed them all. "Well, I'll be," Mrs. Rabbit said under her breath, her nose twitching. "That river isn't going down before breakfast," Mr. Beaver said to Matthew, looking at him with a big shy grin. "Quite right." Matthew smiled and came back to sit in the hearth room. "Oh boy, oh boy." Mr. Beaver wrung his hands and smacked his lips at the thought of Fiddle Fern Fritters. "Thank you, Tommy, for sharing with us," Mrs. Beaver said. "They are hubby's favorite," she grinned. Soon the crackling of fritters and the sweet smell filled the cave. There simply was no way Mother Skunk had this many plates, so Jimmy Squirrel and Misty went outside to gather large maple leaves. Jimmy would run up the trunk and scamper out on a limb. He was snipping off the largest leaves with his teeth. Misty was laughing as she darted back and forth, catching the leaves as they drifted down and stacking them into a basket. They came back in the cave, hauling their basket full of improvised plates, both laughing. Jimmy set the basket near Mother Skunk at the fry pan. She had been pulling crispy Fiddle Fern fritters out of the hot grease with a large wooden spoon that had holes in it for them to drain, and stacking them on her largest platter. "Breakfast, rabbit leaf, and 2 fritters," Mother Skunk called out. "If there are any left, you can have seconds," she instructed, then started toward her chair. "Oh, no, you don't," Clarissa said, pointing her back into the kitchen. "The cook eats first, not last," she laughed. The delicious fritters were warm and crunchy and comforting. It turned everyone's anxious worries into smiles. It was a party in the midst of unsettled times. Albert sat next to Tommy and took his first bite. "Wow, these are great, thanks a million. I was starved." Tommy smiled back. "Glad I could help," he nodded. "So, you saw things on the way here. How bad is it?" Albert asked, his mood suddenly serious. Tommy shrugged. "I've seen worse," he said. Albert nodded. Not only were there seconds, but thirds for those that wanted them. "I like this," Miriam was saying as she tossed her leaf plate in the trash basket. "No dishes." Matthew stood and everyone turned their attention to hear what he was going to say. "First, I believe I speak for everyone when I say how genuinely grateful we are to Mother Skunk for opening her home to us all and for cooking this delicious breakfast. And thank you to Tommy Red Fox for kindly bringing over fiddle ferns." Everyone clapped and cheered. "I think it is important to take a team to survey the damages. Al, are you up to going along?" The stag nodded at Al, who bowed with a flourish. "Hoo-hoo, at your service," he hooted. "Excellent," Matthew smiled at his friend. Mr. Beaver and Mr. Badger had already expressed interest in going. "I'd like Albert, Benjamin, and Nicholas to join us," he said, nodding at each of them. They stood and nodded back. Then Jillian stood. "I'd like to come too." Matthew had great respect for the priestess and agreed. "Yes, I think your presence will be most helpful." As they stepped outside, the forest seemed like a giant wet sponge. The ground oozed water with every step, and all the tree limbs hung down with the weight of the water the leaves were holding. "Look!" Nicholas pointed to the hosta, now flattened. "I guess that's lunch and dinner," Benjamin said, nodding. "We will have to rebuild the meeting circle. The logs are pushed all out of place. At least that's easy to fix," Albert commented. "Can we go to my place first?" Mr. Badger asked Matthew. "I'm just so worried." "Of course," Matthew said, turning toward the badger den. As they walked up the hill, they came across several robins, quick-stepping along the soaked forest floor, then diving down to come up with a long worm. "Good morning," Matthew smiled at the birds. "Yes, it's a fantastic morning. We are having a feast. Worms always come to the surface when the ground is wet." The robins were so happy. "I'm glad to see someone is benefiting from all this," Matthew said to his group as they continued. Leaves were pushed into long trenches where rivers of water had flown the night before. Everything was dripping, and the humidity was at saturation. "The air feels like a second skin," Matthew complained with a frown. Then they saw it. A huge pine tree had fallen over, completely uprooted. The flash flood had washed the soil away from its roots, and the wind had toppled it over. It now lay crashed across the forest floor, blocking the entrance to the badger's den. Mr. Badger looked at Mr. Beaver, and they both sighed. "Well, let's get to work," Mr. Beaver said with enthusiasm. "I'll chop it up and you can haul it away," he said to Mr. Badger. "Until we get this pine cleared, we can't see what shape the den is in." Mr. Beaver was actually glad for the task. This was his specialty, and having a job to do felt good. Matthew stepped up. I'll leave you two to clear the pine tree. The rest of us will continue. Please report back to the cave with your progress report tonight." "Will do," Mr. Badger agreed as the group walked on. "Let's take a look at the river," Matthew said, headed that direction. Walking was slow as they stepped over down tree limbs and piles of dirt and leaves pushed from the now gone torrents of river. "It's amazing how fast the flood comes, and just as amazing how fast it goes," Albert commented. The raging, angry river of yesterday was indeed calmer. It was still out of its banks for sure, and still running fast, and still muddy and full of tree limbs, but its flow and feel had relaxed. "It's going down. Good," Matthew said, staring at the muddy flow. Where the river flowed to the right, it had worn away sections of the bank, exposing layers of soil and sediment. "Wow, look at that," Nicholas pointed. "I'd like to come back in a day or two when the water level drops some more and explore." Albert looked closely. "It's like layers of history exposed," he agreed. "Let's bring Frank. He loves rock hunting," Nicholas nodded to Albert. As they pressed on, the forest folk were busy all around them. Mud was being pushed out of dens and leaves swept away. Birds were flying back and forth with twigs in their beaks, making nest repairs. "At least there's plenty of building material," Albert said as he smiled and waved to a sparrow pushing a new stick into his nest. All the while, Jillian had remained silent. She was listening. She kept hearing faint crying and couldn't pinpoint the source or the direction it was coming from. It was a tiny cry. "Maybe a mouse," she said out loud to herself. Matthew sensed her focus and stopped to look at her. "What is it?" he asked her, worried. "I'm not sure. I keep hearing crying from a tiny voice," she said, her focus turned inward. "Okay, you lead the way, priestess," Matthew said, stepping aside. Jillian nodded and closed her eyes to focus on the tiny voice. She slowly turned in a circle, eyes closed, listening. Then she opened them with a start. "It's Penelope!" she gasped. "This way!" And she darted off, the others running behind to keep up. She rounded the bend in the river and up the hillside. "She's headed to the ancient stones," Matthew called to the others. "Owl, fly ahead and take a look around," Matthew yelled, and Owl lifted off. Their progress slowed as they picked their way up the hill toward the flat place where the ancient stones had always stood. There was an earthen mound of dirt piled around 3 stone giants, 2 of them standing vertical, supporting the enormous weight of a third that spanned between them as a roof. It made a kind of cave that faced the rising sun. It had always been there, back to the time of the first forest. Owl flew back with a report. "Ooh, nothing there but a group of mice," he hooted. "Mice! I knew it!" Jillian said and continued with determination. The others followed in silence. Jillian reached the top and saw the ancient stones. She took a deep breath and approached solemnly. A large group of mice were standing in a circle around 2 in blue robes. They were all crying softly, looking down. "What is it? What happened?" Jillian asked softly as she knelt. The mice stepped back to reveal the dead body of a tiny mouse, drowned. "She wouldn't listen," Chad said, stepping forward. "Penelope led us here to safety, up from our nest. She yelled, 'I'm not taking orders from Piggy Penelope. I'm staying here.' We all pleaded with her, but the water was rising and we left her behind." Another mouse stepped up to talk to Jillian. "Priestess, will you help us with the funeral?" Jillian nodded. "Of course." Then she reached out to Penelope. "It's not your fault. She committed the sin of pride and jealousy. You had to do what was best for the whole group." Then she turned to Nicholas. Benjamin and Albert. Bring me large rocks. Place her body in the back of the ancient stone's cave. Jillian instructed the circle of mice. With each stone she was handed, she spoke a prayer into it and laid it on top of the dead mouse till she had built a mound to cover her. Everyone hold hands, Jillian told the grieving mice. Now, say goodbye in your own words and then tell her to go to the light. As they were finishing, and the dove flew in and landed, she walked up to Chad and Penelope. Thank goodness you are all right. I wanted to fly over and put you under my wing, but the downpour was so intense I couldn't take off. Penelope stroked her neck and she cooed. Anne looked around at the gathered group. Why so sad? She asked. A funeral, Jillian said, and Anne nodded in understanding. Matthew had been watching in silence and now stepped up. Penelope, it seems to me you deserve credit for saving all who followed you. Well done. Then he turned to Anne. Why don't you take Chad and Penelope back to the cave? I know Clarissa wants to talk about the baking crew and everyone is gathered there. Penelope climbed on Anne's back, still whimpering, and took a fistful of feathers. Chad jumped on behind and Anne, now shadow force, took off. Extraordinary, Matthew said, watching them fly off. Brave little spirits, Jillian agreed. Albert stepped up. I'm worried about Jimmy Squirrel's nest. Can we head by there on the way back? Certainly, Matthew said as they left the other mice behind to go back and start the cleanup of their nests. Oh no! Nicholas pointed up to the great oak. There's nothing left. Not only was the nest gone, but the branch it was built on as well. It had snapped off and was laying several feet away in a muddy pile. It's a good thing Jimmy Squirrel brought the family to the cave, Albert said wide-eyed. Matthew nodded. Yes, but they can rebuild. It will just take a few days. When they returned to the cave with their reports from the survey, and the dove had already arrived with Penelope and Chad. Everyone had gathered around with great interest to hear their stories. Shortly after, Matthew, Albert, Benjamin, and Nicholas arrived with Jillian bringing up the rear. Where is Mr. Badger and Mr. Beaver? Their wives asked concerned. Removing a fallen pine tree, Jillian answered, but the rest of the badger den is fine. It just needs a cleaning, Jillian added. Albert and Nicholas looked at each other. How do you know? We couldn't see in, they asked Jillian. She just smiled. Oh, let's go out with baskets and gather those flat hosta leaves for supper. Nicholas suddenly remembered them from earlier in the trip. Molly and Marigold joined him, baskets swinging on their arms. Mr. Beaver and Mr. Badger trudged back, all smiles. We moved a huge pine tree and now you can get in the den. Everything's inside is fine, just dirty, they reported. After supper, Nicholas was telling Frank about the layers of exposed soil the river had carved up. Let's explore in the morning, Frank agreed, excited. Benjamin was sitting next to Bluebell, holding her hands as they talked softly. It was really sad. He was saying, the mouse drowned. She was a mean mouse, but still. Albert told Jimmy Squirrel the bad news. I'm afraid it will be a complete rebuild, but I'll help you gather materials, he offered. Jimmy sighed. I don't mind the rebuilding, Jimmy said sadly, but my bow tie was in there. Tidal overheard and flew off. There was a brilliant sunset, as you only see when there are plenty of clouds for the light to play on. The color started as a brilliant peach with a bright yellow at the western horizon. Then, as they watched, the peach deepened to an amazing hot pink with a deep orange horizon. Molly was looking up, clapping with delight at the light show. Then she saw Tidal flying back toward them, something dangling from his beak. Look! She pointed. Everyone's attention was on the little bird as he landed in front of Jimmy and dropped a wet piece of cloth. My bow tie! Jimmy's face lit up with joy. Mother Skunk clapped her happy clap. I'll wash it for you, good as new. It was another wall-to-wall night, but everyone was relieved. It could have been much worse. They all settled into sleep, comforted by their closeness and sense of community and support. At first light, Frank, Nicholas, and Albert headed out to explore the riverbank. The water had dropped down to almost within its original banks. At first, it didn't seem like there was anything very interesting. But then Nicholas saw something sparkle. A geode! He yelled with excitement. Look, it's purple, he said as he walked down to rinse it off in the stream. Amethyst, Frank said, inspecting it. It's beautiful, he agreed. I'll give it to Mother. Nicholas was so pleased with this find. They dug around a while longer. Albert found another amethyst geode. Actually, I think it's the other half of the first one, Frank said as he twisted and turned the two together. Then suddenly they snapped together to form a perfect stone ball, hiding all the crystal delights in its secret center. So cool, Albert and Nicholas said, smiling at their brother. You know so much about rocks. I'm giving mine to Clara, Albert smiled. Frank was becoming disappointed with himself. He had so hoped to find something interesting. His wildest dreams could not have prepared him for what he drew out of the riverbank next. He stood staring, turning it over in disbelief. What is it? Nicholas shouted to him. Frank yelled and waved Nicholas and Albert over. They ran up and peered into their brother's cupped hands. Is that what I think it is? Albert gasped. Frank nodded. A petrified snake's head. Look, you can see its jawline, an eye socket, and scales, and even a section of its neck. I'll trade you for it, Nicholas said, excited, but Frank shook his head. No, I will keep it always. It's a creature from the first forest, turned to stone. A fossil, Frank said in awe. Nicholas smiled. You will keep it to enjoy in this lifetime. Then you'll give it back to the earth at your funeral. Frank patted Nicholas on the back. So true. Nothing lasts forever, Frank said with a smile. Sure, something does, Albert smiled. Oh yeah, what? Frank said, still staring at the stone snake's head fossil in his hand. Love, Albert answered. Chapter 41. Fiddle, Fern, Fritters, and Fossils. Discussion and questions. Resilience and reliance. We are not the traumas that happen to us. It is not the event, but our response to it that defines us. The forest communities support each other, each one contributing to the well-being of the group. By sharing resources and relying on each other for comfort and support, they have strength and resilience. No one feels like a victim of their circumstances. Their combined support lifts their spirits. They are empowered to deal with the situation and commence with the task of recovery. Question 1. How do you support and contribute to your family group? Question 2. Do you draw strength and comfort from your family and friends? The priestess Jillian is more intuitive and connected to the energy of the forest than most. She trusts her intuition. Question 3. Have you learned to listen to your heart and intuition? The snake fossil is actually real. I found it in a creek when I was 6. My dad took it to a geologist who confirmed its authenticity and tried to offer me $100 for it. Dad said I would just lose it. I kept my treasure and still have it. It makes me feel connected to the ever-turning cycles of life on our earth. Question 4. Do you feel part of the eternal energy and cycles of our Mother Earth? I am the composer and performer for all the music in this video. Both audio recordings and the printed scores are available on mybestfriendsliveinthe.woods.com. I will provide the link below. The painted illustrations are also my creation. Prints are available on mybestfriendsliveinthe.woods.com. This is a novel. The chapters are meant to be heard in the order in which they were written. And while each chapter can stand alone, they do build as new characters are introduced and past events are referred to. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. The chapters are numbered, so if you're just joining us, be sure to go back and watch from chapter 1.
In a dream, in a trance, my spirit flies to the pink horizon of a forest, where fairies say, "Come and play," and the animals say, "There's a bear